Broadcasting on RTM Click and MyTV's Berita RTM channel 123, which is also live streaming on YouTube. I'm your host, Brendan Lepal. Thank you for joining us once again. On tonight's episode, we'll be turning our attention to a significant chapter in Southeast Asia's journey, particularly with Malaysia's stepping into the chairmanship of ASEAN next year. Joining us in the studio to explore what Malaysia's chairmanship could mean for ASEAN's next chapter is Professor Dr. Sufian Jusoh, Director at Institute of Malaysian and International Studies, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, UKM. Welcome to the show, Prof.
Thank you very much, Brendan.
All right, Prof, lots to dissect here, obviously, with regards to next year, Malaysia being the host of ASEAN chairmanship. What is your assessment on the ASEAN-Lao 2024, first and foremost, which obviously they have a theme enhancing connectivity and resilience. Now, how ASEAN has been steered by the Lao chairmanship for the course of 2024, and also has Lao been, effective in promoting their agenda and advancing ASEAN forward?
Thank you very much. I think like any other host, ASEAN chair, Laos had achieved what they wanted to achieve generally. So we are looking at one of their priorities were closing the development gap,
right.
Narrowing the development gap.
Right.
And then they were also looking at power. They wanted to look into how we can actually connect ASEAN through the power grid. And then they were also looking into the agriculture. So these are the three main issues. Of course, there are beyond Lao priority deliverables.
That's right.
ASEAN agenda, for example, enhancing the ASEAN-China free trade agreement, which includes supply chain and connectivity and other issues. So that has already been discussed, and they completed the negotiation. So that's a big achievement for Laos to lead ASEAN into the new, not really new, but enhancement of the ASEAN-China free trade agreement. And then I think Laos also led a discussion on code of conduct in the South China Sea.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Prof, before we actually went on air, you were talking about how it's a very significant year for Malaysia, and not just because we are the hosts, but simply because when it comes to agenda being planned out and sorted out, not just for the country, but for previous country that hosted the chairmanship in particular, it's not just a year that everything can be sorted out. It's like, even though the baton has been passed forward to the next host, it's a gradual improvement for all countries in ASEAN.
Yeah, I mean, we are just not talking about host, we are talking about chair.
Exactly.
So we take up the chairmanship. So we have priorities which we set for the particular year. Some of the priorities are new, but many of the priorities are taken from the previous priorities of the previous host.
That's right. Thank you so much for emphasizing that, Prof. Yeah. And how do we actually move forward from here? What is supposed to be understood by the audience, actually? So
basically, when we prepare the priorities, it has to be discussed with the other member states. So we say, look, for example, we want to look into sustainability or inclusivity. What does it mean? So we can propose few priorities, few activities, but they have to be discussed with all other member states and agreed upon. Then only Malaysia can carry those priorities.
Right. So layman terms, that is. So let's talk about your observation on Datuk Seri Anwar's performance during the recent baton passing ASEAN summit in Vientiane last 2 weeks, especially on his call in pursuing diplomacy towards peaceful agenda regionally and also globally, with specific mentions of war in Gaza, also talking about Russia-Ukraine, the South China Sea, etc., and some of the disputes out there.
Okay, we are talking here about how the Prime Minister is going to carry ASEAN at the global level through the concept what we call ASEAN centrality. Basically, when we look at major issues, global issues, ASEAN centrality involves all ASEAN member states coming together having a consensus on certain issues. Say, for example, when we are looking at the Indo-Pacific,
right?
The American and the Quad were discussing about Indo-Pacific. But ASEAN say, look, Indo-Pacific is only part of the Asia-Pacific, so we shouldn't be running away and creating a new term.
Right.
On the issue of Gaza, ASEAN should be having a common understanding that, look, this is a humanitarian crisis that should be tackled according to the international law, and ASEAN should be one of the main players
right.
On the same page.
Right.
And so is other issues like South China Sea, like Ukraine, so they have to come together and agree on the joint position of ASEAN.
Is ASEAN as a bloc suffice, in order to push forward this development, these strategies, or this peaceful talk or whatsoever? Do you think it's good enough in that sense?
Okay, we are a group of middle powers.
Right.
We are not superpowers, so we still need to form a coalition. That's why ASEAN believe in multilateralism. So we go at the multilateral level, or we go as a group of 10, or coming up maybe 11, and then we have a coalition, consensus building with other groups. Say, for example, that's why we have dialogue partners, ASEAN Plus dialogue partners, ASEAN-Europe meeting, ASEAN Regional Forum. All these are mechanisms to bring ASEAN agenda to the world level, to the global level, where everybody can come in and agree. So it's a kind of ASEAN becoming a rule maker, rather than just a follower.
Right. Now, in addition, Prof, during his intervention at the 44th Summit plenary session, Dr. Sri Anwar urged member states to also reject overtures that are predisposed to cause division in the region, calling for unity to maintain peace and also security. Now, what are these external forces that he mentioned detrimental to ASEAN centrality?
Okay, for example, we go back to the basics.
Sure.
Right? ASEAN was formed in 1967 because we had political security issue.
Right.
Like Indo-China was not stable. We just had confrontation with Indonesia, so everyone getting up together to avoid the effect of the instability in the region. So ASEAN was built based on that basis, and then we have the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation with many countries in the world. Okay, but now ASEAN is a playground of big powers.
Right.
Of all the big powers are here, China, the US, AUKUS, and everyone wants to be seen in ASEAN, with ASEAN. But at the same time, they are trying to exert their influence by asking one or two members to support their position.
Right.
Say, for example, in the case of Ukraine, there are a lot of undercurrent at the diplomatic level, asking each one of the member states to agree on either side of the coin.
Right.
Same goes with South China Sea. Same goes with Gaza. So what we need is everybody in ASEAN, all member states come together and say, look, this is the ASEAN position. We should be pursued as a grouping. One or two member states might have a different perspective, but that is their personal, maybe which they want to carry at the bilateral level without involving ASEAN.
Right. Will this somehow, one way or another, compromise anything altogether? With regards to, of course, they would want to, like as you said, some of them are, from a different view of how things are supposed to be done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they are also part of the ASEAN member states. And what happens here then, Prof?
Okay, normally we have what we call it the ASEAN caucus.
Right.
Like before we reach out to certain dialogue partners, ASEAN member states will discuss their position.
Right.
So they agree, okay, these are the position of ASEAN, leaving behind the national or individual members' interest behind.
That doesn't matter.
Right. So we move forward as a group. So when we go and discuss with the dialogue partners, these are the position of ASEAN. If they want to have a different perspective, that is their bilateral in their national positioning with another partner. So that's fine. But what is important is to portray to the world that ASEAN has a certain stand. And this will come up in a joint communique or media statement issued by the chair. These are the position of ASEAN over 1, 2, and 3 issues.
Right, Prof. Okay, brilliantly explained there. Now, let's go into certain pending issues revolving around ASEAN. First in, of course, on Myanmar-ASEAN legitimacy as regional player is definitely in question until the political and humanitarian crisis in Myanmar is solved. With that being said, can ASEAN or Malaysia in particular play a tougher, or should we even say greater role, coinciding with its chairmanship to just mediate this crisis?
Okay, Malaysia has been playing a great role as a mediator in many places.
Right.
Mindanao, in southern part of Thailand. Now is the time for Malaysia to go back to Myanmar.
Right.
Because we played an important role in the transition between the last military government into the Aung San Suu Kyi government under the NLD through the election process. So Malaysia had the experience of engaging with both sides. But of course it's a different group, different parties, but we understand the complexity of the issue. Myanmar is a very complex place, not because of the coup d'etat, but because of the different ethnicity, different paramilitary group, which cause a lot of uncertainties. Yeah. Even during the NLD's time, Aung San Suu Kyi herself had to negotiate with various groups to maintain the peace and stability in the country. So with the experience of Tan Sri Syed Hamid Albar and also Tan Sri Razali Ismail, Malaysia can play a big role here to do a consensus building, moving towards democratization, election, to legitimize whatever the government needs to be. But this takes time because there are a lot of issues which we may not understand. So that's very important. I think Myanmar issue may not be resolved during our year, but we can set the direction on how to resolve the issue.
To set the pathway, that's right, Prof. Coming back to South China Sea, which is definitely, we're talking about this issue, territorial dispute between Malaysia. Obviously, Malaysia is also expected to make progress in securing its stability in the contested waters. In Laos, Dato' Sri Anwar has called for an early conclusion of Code of Conduct in South China Sea. Now, how do you think Malaysia can actually leverage on its chairmanship to wield influence on this matter, especially, yes, with China?
Okay, the South China Sea is basically, the South China Sea issue has been going on for years.
Yes.
I remember the Code of Conduct was the first time it was discussed seriously was during Cambodia's chairmanship in 2012.
That was 12
years ago.
Time ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it had been carried on and on and on without any real conclusion. Because China said this is a bilateral issue.
Right.
It has nothing to do with ASEAN.
Right.
And ASEAN said, look, this is a regional issue for ASEAN.
Yes.
Although not every member states are part or are literal state to the South China Sea. So what we need is probably looking into a way to find a consensus from all the literal states with China, and then supported by ASEAN member states who are not having a direct access or direct dispute in the South China Sea. Malaysia has been having a very good relationship with China, very good diplomacy. All parties are looking at, basically they are looking at natural resources,
right.
Oil, looking at access to fisheries,
right.
Because South China Sea has one of the largest fish stock in the world.
Right.
I don't see there's any big problem with navigation because this is the right of navigation is there. But we do not want anything that cause trouble or increase the level of complexity in the region.
Right.
So that's the problem.
Now, Prof, we're going to go for a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to be diving deeper into the impending issues with Beijing. Stay tuned. You're watching On the Table.
2025 will be a momentous chapter for ASEAN, rich with significance and promise. We'll mark the 10th anniversary of the ASEAN community founding, a milestone in our collective journey. Malaysia has chosen the theme inclusivity and sustainability. It reflects our aspirations for shared progress, ensuring that no one is left behind. It conveys our hope that the steps we take today will endure in the long run. It underscores our determination to keep the future firmly in sight as we move forward. On behalf of the government and people of Malaysia, I look forward to welcoming you all. Selamat datang ke Malaysia. Thank you.
Welcome back to On the Table, and together with me in the studio, we have Professor Dr. Sufian Jusuf. Moving forward, Prof, let's talk about the impending issues with Beijing. Like it or not, China remains a steady partner, right, for Malaysia, for the bloc, especially with cooperation in many areas. We're talking about trade, infrastructure, cultural, and most importantly, tourism, and the list goes on. Now, a new bilateral free trade agreement, FTA, is expected to be signed next year between ASEAN and China, focusing on strengthening trade, new energy supply chain connectivity, and as usual, the list goes on as well. Now, there is concern over China. We're talking about its capacity in the region. Now, how do you see this new FTA, which will address this issue in terms of sovereignty, protectionism for the local industry out there?
Basically, it's not a new FTA.
Right.
It's upgrading of the existing ASEAN-China FTA.
Strengthening.
Strengthening and building up on those issues. I don't see much problem with China because at the moment, China is simply the largest trading partners, taking into consideration both export and import.
Right.
And then, of course, one of the largest investors in the region. So what we need is to enhance the supply chain, right? The connectivity, because with connectivity, you can secure the supply chain just in case there's any big disruption. Just like what happened in COVID, right?
Yeah.
The first few weeks of COVID, we had problems in getting even thermometers.
That's right.
Because everything was made in China. And so how do you handle that kind of stuff? And then how do you regionalize the supply chain? One of the big issues is, of course, chips and semiconductor. Mm-hmm. If you read in the news yesterday, one of the largest semiconductor manufacturers in the world now is having a problem because the chip, which is not supposed to be in one of the China's computer making company, is found in that company's computer. Right. And the US are saying, look, how on earth this is found in a company which is banned from having the American technology? So in a way, we can go a roundabout way and say, look, we have a direct access to China. We produce what both China and ASEAN needs without having to defer to another country or another partner which may restrict the trade. So this is very important. Connectivity, because China has been helping many parts of ASEAN through the Belt and Road initiatives. Right. One of the, I think, biggest achievements so far is the railway. Right. If you read in the news, KTMB has managed to run the track and the goods train from Port Klang all the way to Kunming through Laos. So that's a big achievement towards ASEAN's own ambition to build the ASEAN Kunming Railway, which then connects to landlocked countries in Europe. Right.
Now, Prof, let's come back down to some of the, because you mentioned dialogue early on the table today. And let's talk about how ASEAN dialogue partners, more than 20 overall, if you want to bring in the numbers. Now, some are on sectoral basis, and of course, with big countries such as US, China, and Japan, and the EU, to name a few. Now, how do you think such cooperation can potentially benefit the bloc, especially with Malaysia being the chair, being at chair, on the chair next year?
Okay, ASEAN is supposed to be neutral, right?
Yes.
But we have, at ICMAS, at our institute, we use this particular term, which is active neutrality. Although ASEAN is neutral, but they are active. Yeah. Meaning the ASEAN member states and ASEAN as an organization will engage with all the important countries and economies in the world to pursue ASEAN interests in economy, in political security, making sure that our regions are safe, no nuclear, no war, having access to all the technologies which we need. So that's why engagement is very important with all these member states. They come, they have every year engagement at normally the second summit, and then they will discuss all the issues which are important bilaterally, meaning ASEAN, maybe with Australia, New Zealand or the UK, and then as a grouping beyond ASEAN and all those dialogue partners in the Asia-Europe meeting and also in the ASEAN Regional Forum or East Asia Summit, which is part of the whole engagement process. Okay, these are non-legally binding.
Non-legally binding.
But it's a consensus building.
Okay.
So even if it's non-legally binding, but what is important is for everyone to be on the same page on issues.
Right. And that's the only way to move forward, of course. And Prof, let's talk about how Malaysia, was included in BRICS. Whether or not this is going to benefit ASEAN as a bloc, what do you think about it, Prof?
Okay, if we look at ASEAN, right, beyond BRICS, before we go into BRICS, G20, Indonesia is in G20, but Indonesia also carries ASEAN's interests in the G20. And then during the G7, they will also invite Indonesia last time as the chair of G20, and they brought in ASEAN's interest. So in terms of BRICS, what we are having now is not just Malaysia, but few other member states, Indonesia and Thailand, and Vietnam also, they are included in the new grouping called BRICS Partners. We are not a full member of BRICS, but we are partners of BRICS. This will bring more understanding of this grouping, because they are also dialogue partners of ASEAN already. And then some of the ASEAN member states are in there to pursue mainly economic interests plus other interests as well. And in the long run, this will actually deepen dialogues between these ASEAN member states and BRICS members. But at the same time, it doesn't stop ASEAN members or ASEAN as a grouping to discuss with others. Because that is our current positioning, right? We can go and talk to G20, you can go and talk to G7, you can also discuss with the OECD and how to actually play a big role in the world stage.
Right. Prof, now what about Malaysia? Do you think that Malaysia can play a balancing act in the Asia-Pacific between deepening ties with BRICS and at the same time not to stir division within ASEAN? Very sensitive situation here, if at all a wrong move is made. What do you think about this, Prof?
Okay, this is a very delicate issue. Very delicate issue because we need to balance the interests of many superpowers in our region, like we discussed earlier, with the US, with China, especially Japan and India. India, although they are middle power at the moment, but they want to be seen as a superpower. Yes. They want to be respected, highly respected. So sometimes you have to try to talk to each one of them. Right. And then how do we maneuver this?
Yes.
This is a very delicate balancing act. It's a very deep, highly skilled diplomacy involving everybody's interests. But I'm sure everyone will want to see the region remain peaceful, because we are all trading nations. We have two of the most important trade lanes in the world, Straits of Malacca and South China Sea.
That's right.
But one problem we are not sure what will happen to the US, because we are not sure whether it's going to be Trump, it's going to be Kamala, but whatever happens, we see the pivot to Asia by Obama just fizzle out, and then IPEF by Biden also fizzled out, and then Trump didn't pay much attention to ASEAN during his presidency. So we really have to see, because we can only know the U.S. attitude towards ASEAN maybe towards the middle of next year, whoever becomes the president.
Right. Big year, definitely, not just for us, but of course the people of America as they vote. Prof, coming down to our last question, before we let you go, and of course very briefly, on regional partnerships. Now, Malaysia definitely aims to foster greater cooperation, and we're talking about extensive dialogue as well in the context of ASEAN, GCC, plus as well the China Summit next year. Now, what are the potential benefits of expanding ASEAN's economic partnership with Gulf countries and also China?
At the moment, Gulf GCC has got an FTA with Singapore. And then China is getting deeper into the Gulf area.
Right.
They are looking into Saudi Arabia. They play the peacemaker between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and then Dubai. Not just about economy, but also infrastructure. So what Malaysia's interest first is we are looking at financial services, Islamic, halal, professional services, where we can sell all these services and products to the Gulf area. And then the Gulf, maybe they want to have access to our energy investment into the energy sector. Yeah, I mean, basically those are the gist at the moment.
Those are the stuff at the moment. All right. Thank you so much, Professor, for actually being here. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but that's all the time we've got for On the Table. Now, for those of you who just tuned in, we've been talking to Professor Dr. Sufian Juso, Director at Institute of Malaysian and International Studies at UKM. Now, a repeat of this episode's broadcast can be viewed again on both RTM Click and Berita RTM YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Prof, once again for being here. And until next time, where we'll discuss another topic of interest. Till then, I'm Brendan Lepal, signing off. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.